Hello, my name is Natasha Thompson, and I would like to welcome you to my interpersonal communications project for my Human Services class 508, Studies in Interpersonal Communication at Liberty University. Next slide. Hello, my name is Latasha Thompson, and I would like to welcome you to my Interpersonal Communications project for my Human Services class 508, Studies in Interpersonal Communications at Liberty University. Next slide. Introduction. In this project, I will begin by discussing my personal definition of enlarging the conversation, what is communication, positives and negatives of my background, and how it affects my behavioral blend. Then I will move on to my overarching goals, potential barriers to those goals, noise pollution, both internal and external, and conclude with my plan of action for reaching my goals. Next slide. Enlarging the conversation. From the beginning of the class, we have focused on enlarging the conversation, and for a while I had no idea what this meant. After watching the presentations and indulging in the readings, the definition for this thing has started to become clear. When it comes to defining enlarging the conversation, I take it to encompass the point that we can maximize our quality of communication through talking and listening when we understand that people are unique and that there are roles and responsibilities for each party involved to get the most fulfillment out of the conversation. Next slide. What is communication? Stewart states that there is a direct link between the quality of your communication and the quality of your life. I take this to mean that the better we are at communicating with others can produce a better outlook on our lives and other people's lives around us. Stewart says that communication is the continuous, complex, collaborative process of verbal and nonverbal meaning-making. And Peterson states that there are two levels in that communication: sharing information and connecting with others. There is also a subset of communication that Stewart speaks of called interpersonal communication. This occurs when people involved talk and listen in ways that maximize the presence of the personal. Next slide. Communication continued. Peterson brings up a very good point when he states that pure communication blocks access to deeper relationships and our friendships remain distant and impersonal. There have been people in my life who, because we could not seem to communicate effectively, our relationships have just been about business and nothing personal. This is not to say that they did not have a great personality. It was just the fact that our personalities and communication could not connect. That brings me to my next topic of my interpersonal communication and behavioral blend. The results from my interpersonal communication skills test gave me a 78, which indicates that I am fairly adept at interpreting other people's words and actions and seeing things from their perspective. I will do my best to place myself in other people's shoes in order to better understand them, and will likely adjust my behavior accordingly if a person I'm conversing with seems confused or perhaps uncomfortable. Next slide. My DISC personality type and blend results were scored as SI for what is expected of me and CIS for what is me. Carbonell states that based off my behavioral blend, I tend to work hardest at impressing others, supporting those who need my help, and planning ways to improve people's lives. Another statement that brought about self-reflection was when Carbonell said, "You are the ultimate social butterfly, but you may need to be more careful to what attracts you." This brought me to the scripture in 1 Corinthians 15 and 33 that says, "Be not deceived. Evil communication corrupts good manners." I believe that my personality blend can have positives and negatives, but by hanging with people who have bad communication skills, it will begin to affect my own communication. Next slide. Behavioral blend, CIS. As I stated before, this behavioral blend does come with its positives and negatives. The DISC personality test listed some of the negatives associated with my personality, such as that I need to be more demanding, ambitious, straightforward, and so on. It also listed some positives of this blend, like the fact that I am kind, helpful, hardworking, and generous. Growing up in a very strict Christian home, some of those qualities were just instilled in me. As an adult, I can't help but be generous, but because that was the way my mother always taught me to be. I had to be hardworking and tolerant because that's what a pastor's daughter was expected to do. I also learned not to be straightforward because you didn't want to seem disrespectful or sassy. Overall, I think my personal background does agree with this assessment, and I'm actively working to turn those negative qualities I learned into positives in my life. Next slide. My overarching goals. This brings me to my next point. What I want to do with the information I have obtained. What are my overarching goals? My first goal is that I would like to become a level 1 listener. I am currently at a level 2 due to the fact that I sometimes tune out in conversations and only slightly concentrate on what the speaker is saying. Burley Allen would say that I am a self-conscious listener because sometimes I give more attention to what's going on internally that I can only slightly focus on what the speaker is saying. My second goal is to be able to communicate my thoughts and ideas effectively. I realize that what and how I say things will determine how others respond and whether or not the conversation goes any further. Next slide. Potential barriers to my overarching goals. I believe that I do have certain barriers to get over before I reach my goals. The first deals with perception, reception, and attention. Burley Allen states that our perception about a person, a situation, or a subject can influence our reception and how much we will pay attention to what is being said. Another barrier is biased listening. If I already have a negative opinion about the subject being discussed, what the speaker says may bore me and I will tune out. Final barriers that I have deal with forming habits. Burley Allen states that habits are a systemized set of feelings or actions resulting from old adaptations, often developed as a response to a childhood stimulus that now only exists in the brain. Next slide. Noise pollution. The next topic I would like to discuss is what is noise pollution. Goins and Hagler state that the definition of noise pollution is environmental noise that is imposed on us without our consent, often against our wills, and at times places and volumes over which we have no control. There are internal and external ways that noise pollution can affect listening. Internally, if a speaker seems to be unclear to the listener, or the listener may only be hearing what they want to hear, or if the listener is fatigued. The solution to this is for the listener to stay alert in the conversation, keep an open mind, and ask questions about anything they don't understand. When it comes to external noise pollution, it can be seen in clock watching, being distracted by room temperatures, and being in a noisy place. The solution to this is being an active listener by fully indulging yourself in the conversation, finding a quiet place to talk, and making sure the room temperature is comfortable for everyone. Next slide. Plan of action. This slide will go over my plan of action to achieve my overarching goals. The first step I will take is to start listening without agreeing, disagreeing, advising, or defending, because these tasks may not be helpful in letting the talker be heard and may potentially do more damage to the relationship than good. The next step I will take is to resist doing the flat brain tango. Peterson uses this scenario to describe it. It's like escalation between two countries. You add a few soldiers at the border, we bring in a tank or two. You deploy some guided missiles, and we start an all-out war. This is the way I would go about listening to people who had negative things to say. They would give a reason to be against something, and I would give a reason to be for it. And after a couple of back and forth rounds, we were in a totally unnecessarily heated argument. The last step I will take is to admit ignorance. Sometimes instead of fully listening, I would tune out because I didn't know what the person was talking about, nor did I ask questions to get clarity. Admitting ignorance will allow me to get clarification on topics I don't understand or am not familiar with. Next slide. References. The last slide is my reference page for all of the sources that were cited in this presentation. Thank you for listening, and I hope you have enjoyed this journey through my interpersonal communication project. Have a blessed day.